My name's Lucas. I'm 28, and for most of my life I've been the quiet one in the family, the reliable one, the guy who would cancel plans, cover shifts, or babysit nieces and nephews just to keep the peace. I'm the oldest of three, which in my family apparently meant I had to play third parent instead of just being a brother. My dad works a demanding job. My mom loves to orchestrate family events like she's directing a Broadway play, and my siblings, both younger, have been spoiled since day one. I'm not saying that out of jealousy. I'm saying that as fact. New phones on release day, paid trips for spring break, even car insurance magically taken care of. Meanwhile, I worked through college delivering pizzas just to afford rent and tuition. I used to tell myself it was just the way things were, that maybe I was just more independent, and that was something to be proud of. But in the back of my mind, there was always that little voice asking why I was the only one expected to sacrifice. The first time I really noticed how one-sided things were was at a family dinner 2 years ago. I had just gotten a promotion at work, something I had been grinding for nonstop, and I was honestly proud of myself. When I mentioned it at the table, my dad said, "That's nice, son," and immediately pivoted to talk about my brother's new car, which, by the way, my parents had paid half of. My sister joked that I could finally stop being so broke and asked if I could help pay for her next trip since I was loaded now. Everyone laughed, like it was just harmless teasing, but I remember sitting there with this knot in my chest. I had worked overtime, skipped weekends, and lived off instant noodles for months to get where I was, and all I got was a punchline. Things escalated slowly from there. Every time there was a family event, I was expected to show up early to set up tables and stay late to clean, even though my siblings could come and go as they pleased. If I said no, I'd get texts from my mom guilt-tripping me about family unity and stepping up as the oldest. I started noticing that my achievements were always brushed off, while every minor success of my siblings was celebrated like they had cured cancer. When my brother passed one of his exams after failing twice, they threw him a surprise dinner. When I bought my first car with my own money, nothing but a comment from my mom about how I should have consulted dad first because he could have found me a better deal. The turning point came earlier this year, right before my birthday. My mom called me and said, very casually, that my siblings were struggling with bills and it would be such a blessing if I could pitch in to help them out for a few months. She framed it as if I'd be some kind of hero for doing it, but the way she said it felt less like a request and more like an expectation. I hesitated, told her I'd think about it, and she sighed and said, "I just wish you'd be more of a team player, Lucas. Family comes first, you know." I didn't say yes, but somehow the next group chat message had my name tagged with, "Thanks for helping out, Lucas," and heart emojis from my siblings. I felt trapped. I did it anyway, sent them money every month for 3 months straight, even though it meant cutting back on my own expenses. And not once, seriously, not one single time, did anyone thank me directly. The only acknowledgement I got was a text from my sister asking if the next payment could come a few days earlier because her rent was due. That's when it started hitting me that this wasn't a one-off. They didn't see me as part of the family. They saw me as the family's safety net. Then came the dinner that lit the fuse. We were all at my parents' house, sitting around the table like usual. My brother was bragging about some new gadget he bought, and my mom laughed and said, "Well, we wouldn't be able to keep this family afloat if it weren't for Lucas helping out, right?" I thought for a split second she was finally giving me some credit, but then she added, "That's what being the oldest is about, sacrificing so everyone else can thrive." My brother grinned and said, "Guess you're basically our sponsor now." They all laughed. I didn't. I went home that night and sat in my car for a long time just thinking about every time I'd been expected to step up, about every joke at my expense, about how my own birthday had been forgotten last year because everyone was busy planning my sister's engagement party. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Not loud, explosive anger, but that quiet, cold kind that just sits in your stomach. For the first time, I realized I didn't have to keep playing this role they'd written for me. I didn't have to keep being the one who bails everyone out. A few days later, my dad called me and told me that since I was doing so well now, they were thinking I should start contributing a set amount every month for household upkeep, since I still occasionally came over for dinners. He actually used the phrase, "fair share." I couldn't believe it. I was already paying my own rent, my own utilities, and now they wanted me to pay for theirs too. Just because I was financially stable? That was the moment something in me snapped. I didn't yell, I didn't argue. I just said, I'll think about it. And as soon as I hung up, I opened my laptop and stared at an email I had been sitting on for weeks. A job offer. One that would move me to another country. I hadn't accepted yet because I thought staying close to my family was the right thing to do. And that's when everything shifted. I didn't reply to the job offer right away. I told myself I'd give it a few days, maybe talk to my family one more time, see if we could find some middle ground. But the universe, or maybe my family's talent for proving me right, didn't give me much time to think. 2 days later, I got a message from my mom in the family group chat. Hey Lucas, just a reminder we're having a little party for your sister this weekend. It's her 1-year engagement anniversary. I stared at my phone. 1-year engagement anniversary? Was that even a thing? It wasn't a wedding. It wasn't a baby shower. It wasn't anything except another excuse to celebrate my sister. The kicker was the follow-up text. Can you come early to help set up? We're thinking of doing a backyard dinner. Oh, and could you bring some wine? Everyone liked the bottles you brought last time. There was no question mark at the end of that message. No, if you can. It was just assumed that I would. I should have said no right there. Instead, I agreed, because that's what I'd been conditioned to do. So Saturday rolls around. I show up early, and sure enough, I'm the one hauling chairs, setting up string lights, arranging food trays. My brother rolled in an hour later, plopped down on the couch with a drink, and said, "Good job. Man, this looks great." Not a finger lifted. During dinner, I tried to make conversation with my parents about my job. I hinted, just hinted, that I might have some exciting news soon. Before I could even explain, my mom cut me off to tell everyone how my sister might be getting a promotion at her job soon and how we should keep her in our thoughts. Everyone clapped. My news. Completely ignored. Then came the moment that really hit me in the chest. Toward the end of the night, my dad stood up with his glass and said, "Let's give a toast to your sister for making us all proud. She's going to do great things." He looked around the table and added, "And let's also thank Lucas for helping make tonight happen. Always putting family first, just like a good eldest should." He said it with a proud smile, like it was the highest compliment. I forced a smile back, but inside I was boiling. It wasn't gratitude, it was expectation, like they were reminding me of my job description. The next morning, I found out from my cousin, who was more like a friend to me, that my sister had been telling people I was basically a live-in bank, and that she didn't need to worry about saving because I'd never let them struggle. She said it like it was some running joke. My cousin even told me people were laughing about it at the party after I left. That was the first time I really felt humiliated. I wasn't just being taken advantage of quietly. They were openly making me the punchline. It didn't stop there. A few weeks later, I got another call from my mom. This time, it wasn't even a request, it was an announcement. "Lucas, we've decided it would be easier if you just send a set amount every month for your siblings' rent. That way we don't have to ask each time." I sat there in silence, stunned. My own rent had gone up recently, and my budget was tight. When I told her I wasn't sure I could do that anymore, she sighed dramatically and said, "You're being selfish. Your brother and sister are still finding their footing. You were supposed to lead by example." That phrase, "lead by example," rang in my head like a bell. I was done. I started pulling away little by little after that. I stopped answering texts right away. I skipped a family brunch or two, saying I was busy. And every time I did, I got guilt-tripping messages. "We missed you today. Your siblings asked why you weren't here. Family is everything, Lucas." Then, just when I thought maybe I was imagining things, came the final straw. My dad called me one night, casually, like we were just catching up. After some small talk, he said, "We were talking, and we think it's time you start paying rent here." I blinked. "What rent? I don't live there." He chuckled like it was no big deal. "You eat here a few nights a month. You use the utilities when you visit, and it's not fair for us to shoulder everything when you're in such a good position. Your mom thinks $300 a month is fair." I sat there gripping my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. They weren't just asking for help anymore. They were literally trying to charge me for being part of the family. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just said, "I'll think about it," and hung up. That night, I opened the email again. The job offer was still sitting there, waiting for me. My cursor hovered over the accept button. For the first time in my life, I felt completely calm, not angry, not sad, just clear. This wasn't about family anymore. This was about me. But before I made any decisions, I decided I'd give them one last chance. One final dinner to see if there was even a sliver of respect left in them for me. Not as their ATM, not as their scapegoat, but as their son and brother. That dinner is where everything truly shifted. And that's where the story really begins. I went into that dinner with a plan. Not a devious plan, just a mental checklist. I told myself I'd stay calm, watch how they treated me, and decide once and for all whether there was any point in holding on. I even brought a nice bottle of wine, the kind I usually save for special occasions. A part of me was still hoping they'd surprise me, that maybe things had just been a misunderstanding and this was my chance to reset the tone. When I arrived, the house was already buzzing. My sister was in the kitchen, taking selfies with the charcuterie board, and my brother was outside playing music way too loud on the speaker. My mom gave me a quick hug and said, "Perfect timing. Can you grab the chairs from the garage?" "No, hello." "No. Thanks for coming early." Just an order, like I was the hired help. I swallowed my irritation and did it anyway, dragging the chairs into the backyard, setting them up while everyone else laughed and chatted. By the time I sat down, I was sweaty and covered in dust. Nobody noticed. Dinner started out as usual. Lots of stories about my sister's job, my brother's plans with his friends, the usual small talk. I waited for someone to ask me about my life. No one did. Eventually, I tried to steer the conversation. "Actually, I might have some big news soon," I said carefully. "There's this opportunity at work." Before I could finish, my sister cut me off with a laugh. "Oh, is this about that new girl you were dating? Did she finally dump you?" Everyone laughed, even my mom. I felt my ears go hot. "No," I said, forcing a smile. "It's about work." "I might be." "Speaking of work," my dad interrupted, setting his fork down. "We were thinking about what we talked about last time, about rent. Your mom and I crunched some numbers, and we think $350 is fair. That'll cover utilities, groceries for when you visit, and, help us out a bit." I just stared at him. "You're asking me to pay rent, to come to dinner." "It's not rent," my mom said quickly, like that made it better. "Think of it as contributing. Everyone pitches in. Your siblings can't right now, so it falls on you." My brother grinned and said, "Yeah, man, you're the big shot now. Don't be stingy." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You want me to pay to be part of this family?" My mom's smile faltered. "Lucas, don't make this dramatic. We're just asking you to do your part." I felt something snap. Months, no, years, of swallowing my frustration, brushing off the favoritism, pretending the jokes didn't hurt, all boiled to the surface at once. "I have been doing my part," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. "I've paid your bills, I've sent money to my siblings, I've shown up early and stayed late. I've done everything you've asked for years. And now you're asking me to pay for the privilege of sitting here while you laugh at me." The table went quiet. My dad frowned and said, "Watch your tone. We're just trying to keep this family together." That's when my sister rolled her eyes and muttered, "There he goes again, acting like a martyr." I turned to look at her, and in that moment, I knew nothing was going to change. I knew they were never going to see me as anything other than the one who picks up the slack, the one who sacrifices so everyone else can be comfortable. So I stood up, quietly, calmly. "You know what? You're right. Everyone pitches in. But from now on, so do you. I'm done being the only one who sacrifices." My mom's face went pale. "Lucas, sit down. You're overreacting." But I didn't sit down. I grabbed my jacket and my keys, and I walked out. Nobody followed me. When I got home, I didn't even take my shoes off. I opened my laptop, pulled up the job offer email, and clicked accept. That was the night I stopped being the family's safety net. But that wasn't the last time we spoke, not by a long shot. Because a week later, I got a phone call that changed everything. And it set the stage for what I was about to do next. The silence hit me first. After that dinner, the group chat went quiet. No more memes, no more casual invites. At first, I thought maybe everyone just needed a little space. But then, 2 days later, my mom sent me a text. "We need to talk. Call me." When I called, she didn't even say hello. "Lucas, what you did the other night was incredibly disrespectful," she said, her tone cold. "Walking out like that embarrassed us in front of everyone." I gripped the phone so tightly my hand hurt. "Embarrassed you?" "Mom, you asked me to pay rent for coming to dinner." She sighed, like I was being difficult. "You're twisting it. We just wanted you to contribute, and instead you stormed off and made your sister cry." Do you have any idea how hard that was for her? I closed my eyes. Mom, I've been contributing for years. I just said no this time. That's not the point, she snapped. The point is, family is supposed to stick together. Your father and I raised you better than this. You owe us more respect. That word, oh, echoed in my head long after we hung up. I sat in my apartment staring at the wall, feeling like I had just been cast out. Part of me wanted to call back and apologize, just to make the knot in my chest go away. But then I remembered every time I'd bent over backward for them and got nothing but more demands in return. The next few weeks were brutal. My siblings stopped replying to my texts. I wasn't invited to Sunday dinner. My mom sent me guilt-tripping messages about how the house feels empty without you, and your brother keeps asking why you don't love them anymore. My dad sent a single message that read, "When you're ready to be part of this family again, you know where to find us." At work, I buried myself in projects, staying late just so I wouldn't have to sit alone in my apartment with my thoughts. I told no one about what was going on, just smiled and said I was fine whenever someone asked. But at night, lying in bed, I felt this hollow ache in my chest. I'd always thought of family as something solid, unshakable. Now it felt like I was on the outside looking in, and the worst part was they didn't seem to care. One night, I almost texted my mom to say I was sorry. I even typed it out. But before I hit send, I remembered the night I skipped a family brunch because I had food poisoning and they called me dramatic for missing it. I remembered my sister's voice joking that I was their live-in bank. And I remembered the look on my dad's face when he told me to watch my tone, like I was still a kid. That's when something shifted. The pain didn't go away. It got sharper, cleaner. I realized I couldn't just sit in this limbo waiting for them to let me back in. If I was going to do this, I had to commit. So I started making quiet changes. I rerouted my savings into a separate account they didn't know about. I sold a few things I didn't need, old furniture, extra electronics, and started packing boxes, one at a time. I told everyone at work I had accepted a new position overseas and would be moving in a few weeks. My coworkers threw me a little farewell party, and for the first time in months, I felt genuinely happy. But then, just when I thought I had made my peace with leaving, my mom showed up at my apartment unannounced. I'll never forget the look on her face when I opened the door, half relief, half accusation. "Lucas," she said, pushing past me into the living room. "We need to talk." I stood there, frozen, while she looked around and saw the half-packed boxes. "You're really leaving?" she asked, her voice breaking. "After everything we've done for you?" I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could, my phone buzzed. A message from my brother lit up the screen. "Hey man, since you're leaving, can you send your last payment early? Sis is short on rent." I just stared at it. And in that moment, every ounce of guilt I had been carrying turned into something else entirely. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't scared. I was done, and I was ready to make sure they knew it. When my mom left my apartment that night, she didn't yell or cry. She just gave me this look, like I was some stranger she couldn't quite figure out, and walked out without saying goodbye. Strangely, I didn't feel shattered the way I thought I would. Instead, there was this quiet clarity in my chest. The next morning, I confirmed my flight. One-way ticket, departure in 3 weeks. I posted my apartment listing online and got a dozen inquiries within the day. By the end of the week, I had a signed sublease agreement and a little extra cash in my pocket from selling off the furniture I didn't plan on taking. Work was another story. Once word got out that I was leaving, people started coming up to me. People I barely talked to, offering congratulations and asking to grab coffee before I left. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. Like all the late nights and missed weekends had actually meant something. My boss even told me he'd been recommending me to colleagues abroad, which explained why the company overseas had been so quick to offer me a position. Every day that passed, I felt lighter. I started going to the gym after work, just to burn off some of the restlessness. I was eating better, sleeping better. The constant buzzing anxiety I used to feel whenever my phone lit up with a family group chat message was gone. But the real turning point came 2 weeks later, when I got my first advance payment from the new job. It was more money than I'd ever seen hit my account at once. I sat there staring at the number, this mix of disbelief and pride washing over me. This wasn't just money, this was freedom. I used part of it to book a nicer apartment in the city I was moving to, somewhere with big windows and a balcony that overlooked the river. And then, on a whim, I booked a reservation at a high-end restaurant for the night before my flight. Not because I needed to celebrate with anyone, just because I wanted to sit there by myself, order something expensive, and toast to the fact that I had finally chosen myself. Meanwhile, my family's texts started trickling in again. First it was my mom, sending me photos of family dinners I wasn't at, with captions like, "Wish you were here." Then my sister, who sent me a casual message asking if I'd changed my mind about helping her with rent because she was super stressed. My brother even called once, acting like nothing had happened, and asked if I could help him buy concert tickets. I didn't reply right away. I wanted to see how it felt to not jump at every request. And you know what? It felt good. It felt powerful. One Friday night, while packing, I found an old notebook I'd kept during college where I used to write down goals. On one page, I had scribbled, "Move abroad, get promoted, live somewhere with a view." I sat there smiling, realizing that somehow, despite everything, I was about to check every box on that list. A few days before my flight, my company hosted a farewell dinner for me. They gave me a sleek watch as a parting gift, and my boss raised a glass and said, "Lucas has been one of the most reliable, hardworking people I've ever had on my team. They're lucky to have him." Hearing those words hit me harder than I expected. For years, my family had made me feel like reliability was just my duty, like it wasn't something to be acknowledged or appreciated. But here was someone recognizing it as a strength. I walked out of that dinner into the cool night air, stood on the sidewalk for a minute, and just breathed. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was just ready. And then, 2 days before my flight, my mom called me again. This time, she didn't sound cold. She sounded desperate. "Lucas, we need to talk before you go. Please, come over tonight." Something in her voice made me pause. I agreed, curious to see what could possibly be so urgent now. When I showed up at the house, everyone was there: my mom, my dad, my siblings. And the second I sat down, my dad cleared his throat and said, "Before you leave, there's something we need to discuss about the family finances." I had no idea that what he was about to say would set the stage for everything that came next. My dad leaned back in his chair like he was about to deliver a company boardroom presentation. My mom sat with her hands clasped. My sister was scrolling on her phone, and my brother was bouncing his knee under the table. I could feel the tension before anyone even spoke. "Lucas," my dad started, "your mom and I have been reviewing our finances, and, well, things are tighter than we thought. With the mortgage, utilities, and helping your siblings get on their feet, we've been dipping into our savings more than we should. If this keeps up, we might have to sell the house." I stayed quiet, waiting for the real point. "That's why we think it would be helpful if you could contribute a little more," he said carefully. "You're in a good position now, and your help could keep this house in the family." I let out a small laugh, not because it was funny, but because I could feel that old, familiar script being handed to me again. This savior role. "So let me get this straight," I said, keeping my tone calm. "You want me to pay so you can keep funding my siblings' lifestyle, and I get what? A thank you card?" My mom frowned. "Lucas, don't be cruel. This is your family's home. You grew up here. Don't you want it to still be here when you visit?" I looked around the room. The same room where I'd been scolded as a kid for not getting perfect grades, where I'd been told to set an example when my siblings broke rules, where I'd sat through countless dinners listening to everyone talk over me. Do I want it to still be here? I repeated, "I'm not sure I care as much as you think I do." That got a visible flinch from my sister, but she still muttered, "Wow, selfish much?" I ignored her and turned back to my parents. "I can't help you," I said simply. "Not anymore." The room went quiet. My dad's jaw tightened, and he said, "You're making a mistake, son. Family doesn't turn its back on family." "Funny," I said quietly, "because that's exactly what it feels like you've been doing to me for years." I stood up, ready to leave, when my mom suddenly blurted out, "Fine. If you won't help, then at least you should know. Your name is still on the emergency contact for the mortgage. If something happens, the bank could come to you first." I froze. "What?" My dad sighed. "When you co-signed for that loan years ago, we never took you off. We meant to, but with everything going on, it slipped through the cracks. If things go south, technically, you're on the hook." It felt like the air got sucked out of the room. I had completely forgotten about co-signing that refinance they begged me to help with when I was fresh out of college. At the time, I thought it was just paperwork, a way to get them a better interest rate. But now it meant that if they defaulted, my credit and my finances would be destroyed. I sat back down, suddenly very calm. Good to know, I said. Thanks for telling me. They looked relieved, like maybe that was the end of it, like maybe I'd now feel obligated to help them keep up with payments. But what they didn't realize was that they'd just handed me something much more valuable than guilt. They'd handed me leverage. When I left that night, I didn't argue or raise my voice. I simply told them I'd be in touch before I left the country. And the whole drive home, my mind was racing, not with anger this time, but with ideas. The next morning, I called my bank and set up an appointment to review the mortgage paperwork. I wanted to see exactly where I stood, what rights I had, and what options were available to me. The banker explained that as a cosigner, I had full visibility into the account and could request statements anytime I wanted. That was the first moment I felt the balance of power shift. In the days that followed, I quietly gathered every document I could find: loan agreements, payment histories, even the property value. What I found was eye-opening: late payments, missed deadlines, and a refinance that had nearly been denied because of their credit history. They had been skating by for years, and my name had been the safety net keeping it all together. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to their demands. I had something solid, something that put me in control, and I wasn't going to waste it. I didn't tell them what I knew. I didn't even hint at it. Instead, I smiled in the group chat for the first time in weeks, sent a polite message saying I'd be over one last time before my flight, and kept packing my bags. Because now, I wasn't just leaving, I was leaving on my terms. And I was about to make sure they never treated me like the family ATM again. I spent the next week preparing, but not in the way my family probably imagined. They probably thought I was coming over to make peace, maybe even hand them a check on my way out the door as some kind of final act of responsibility. Instead, I was making sure every detail was lined up so there would be no confusion about where I stood, legally, financially, emotionally. 2 days before my flight, I met with a lawyer recommended by one of my coworkers. I explained everything: the co-signed mortgage, the late payments, the pressure from my family. The lawyer listened carefully, then laid it out for me in plain terms. You can absolutely protect yourself here. You can request to be removed as co-signer, though it will force them to refinance under their own credit history. And if they can't, you can freeze any further financial obligations in writing, which shields you from liability down the line. It's going to make things uncomfortable with your family, but it's the safest move. Uncomfortable didn't scare me anymore. I signed the paperwork to formally request removal and to have all future correspondence from the bank sent to me directly until the process was complete. The banker had warned me this would trigger a review of their finances, which meant my parents would get a call from the bank. That night, I showed up at their house for my last dinner. They had gone all out. My mom had cooked my favorite dish. There were candles on the table, and for a second, a very small part of me almost wavered. But then my dad started talking about the future of the house and keeping the family together, and my sister piped up with, "So you're going to help, right? I mean, now that you're moving, you probably won't even notice the money." That's when I knew this wasn't a farewell dinner. This was an ambush dressed up as family time. I waited until everyone had their plates, then set down my fork. "Actually," I said calmly, "that's what I wanted to talk about. I've made some decisions, and I think it's time I'm clear about them." They all stopped eating. "I met with the bank this week," I continued, "and I've started the process to have my name removed from the mortgage." My mom blinked like she hadn't heard me right. "Removed? Lucas, you can't do that. We need your name to keep the rate low." "I can," I said evenly, and I did. "If you want to keep the house, you'll have to refinance under your own credit." My dad's face turned red. "Do you have any idea what you're doing? This could raise our payments." "Yes," I said, my voice calm but firm. "And that's not my problem anymore. I've carried this family's financial burden for years, and it ends today. You will no longer use my name or my credit as a safety net. You will not ask me for rent or for contributions or for loans to cover my siblings' bills. I'm done." My sister scoffed. "You can't just walk away like that. That's cruel." I turned to her and smiled. Not a mocking smile, but the kind you give someone who just doesn't get it. Cruel would be letting you all keep draining me dry until one day I wake up broke because of decisions I never made. This isn't cruel. This is fair." My mom's eyes filled with tears. "But Lucas, if we can't refinance, we could lose the house." I nodded. "Then maybe it's time to think about living within your means." I could feel my hands trembling under the table, but my voice stayed steady. For the first time, I wasn't pleading or defending myself. I was stating facts, and there was nothing they could do to argue with them. Before anyone could speak again, I stood up and reached into my jacket pocket. I pulled out an envelope and placed it in the center of the table. Inside is a full accounting of every payment I've made for this family over the last 3 years: rent for my siblings, utility bills, loans I covered. Consider it my final contribution. After today, there will be no more. My dad didn't move to pick it up. My mom just stared at it like it was a snake. My brother muttered something under his breath, but I didn't catch it, and honestly, I didn't care. I walked out before they could say another word. The next morning, just before heading to the airport, I got a flurry of messages. My mom begging me to reconsider, my sister accusing me of abandoning them, my dad warning me I'd regret this. I didn't reply. Instead, I took a photo of my boarding pass, sent it to the group chat with a simple, "Take care of yourselves," and put my phone on airplane mode. By the time I landed in my new city, the bank had already called them. I knew because there were 10 missed calls waiting for me, all from my dad. And as I stood there in the arrivals hall, watching people hug their loved ones, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. But the real fallout, and their reaction when they realized just how much control they had lost, was still coming. The first week in my new city was a blur. New apartment, new office, new routines. Every morning I'd wake up to a stream of unread messages from my family, and every morning I'd swipe them away. At first, they were angry. "You blindsided us. You're tearing this family apart." Then they turned desperate. "We can't get approved without you. Please, we'll lose the house." Finally, about 3 weeks in, I got a message that made me stop scrolling. It was from my mom, short and shaky. "The bank denied the refinance. We have 60 days to find a solution or we'll have to sell." I sat with that message for a long time, not because I was gloating, but because a younger version of me would have caved right then. I would have called the bank, fixed it, saved the day, and locked myself back into the role they'd written for me. But I wasn't that version of me anymore. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I waited until I had a quiet evening free, poured myself a glass of wine, and called my mom. She picked up on the first ring, her voice already cracking. "Lucas, please." "Mom," I said gently. "I heard about the refinance. You can still fix this," she rushed out. "If you call the bank and tell them you're staying on, they'll keep the rate and we won't lose the house. We can figure the rest out later." I took a breath and let the silence stretch before I answered. "I'm not calling the bank, Mom. I'm not putting myself back on that mortgage. I warned you before I left. I'm done being the safety net." There was a sharp inhale, like she'd been slapped. "Do you understand what this means? We could lose everything." "No," I said, my tone calm but firm. "You could lose the house, but you'll still have each other. And maybe this will finally force everyone to take responsibility for their own lives." For a moment, the line was quiet except for her breathing. Then, in a small voice, she said, "Your father is furious." "I'm sure he is," I replied. "But I'm not doing this out of spite. I'm doing it because I want a relationship with you that isn't based on guilt or money. If that's not possible right now, then I need distance until it is." There was another long pause. When she finally spoke again, it was barely above a whisper. "I don't know what we're going to do. That's for you to figure out," I said softly. Just like I had to figure out my own life. I could almost feel her deflate on the other end of the line. When we hung up, I knew there would be anger, blame, maybe even months of silence. But I also knew something had shifted for them and for me. A month later, I got a text from my cousin back home. "They sold the house. Your siblings are scrambling to find their own places. Your dad's been quiet. Your mom, she keeps saying she wishes she'd listened to you sooner." I stood on my new balcony overlooking the river, the city lights reflecting off the water, and smiled to myself. Not a smug smile, not a vengeful one, just a quiet, satisfied one. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one cleaning up the mess. And it felt incredible.